Welcome in, everybody, to the Views from the 573 podcast. Hope you guys are doing well. On this edition of the show, it is our NBA Finals preview. Diving deep into this matchup between the Thunder and the Pacers, two small market teams here. First, here, according to from our guest Charles Jones, who sent me this interesting fact that we had two teams below the luxury tax. Charles, first off, welcome into the show. But when you sent me that was kind of simultaneously, I was kind of shocked by that, but also not shocked considering NBA Finals history, and we got Celtics, Lakers, and all those teams. But yeah, that was I couldn't partially believe that when you sent that to me.
Yeah, look, that was a first for me too. Another tidbit I wanted to send you. I didn't get a chance to. I saw it earlier. It was saying that like this was the shortest distance between final opponents since like 1970. It's 1970, 71. Because it's
1970.
like 600 some miles between Indiana and Oklahoma. I was like, that's crazy. We got a finals like this with two small markets. And what makes it funny is Indiana is the bigger market. I know you probably seen
Uh,
the memes, Stern rolling over in his grave at this finals.
oh
Like,
man, yeah, that's kind of crazy. I mean, but I guess you kind of take a look back at previous finals. I mean, you had Boston and Golden State a couple years ago. They're on opposite sides of the coast. So I mean, yeah, that is kind of crazy to kind of think about.
yeah,
That's absolutely nuts. But no, I think we'll dive into the finals here a little bit here soon. But we got a couple things to talk about. One is being one the team that Indiana knocked out is the New York Knicks, with them making a change, moving on from Tom Thibodeau after 5 years. And we were beforehand and talking about the Knicks decision here, and it being a case of where Tibbs may be not may be the guy that gets them to this level that they're at now, but not the guy that get them over the hump. We were talking about this beforehand too. There's some Knicks fans that are split on this. Some like it, some aren't. And I mean, you got Mike Malone out there, you got some other guys out there. Charles, how are you feeling about this move?
uh, to go on the point, I think like the Knicks fan base are like split because like we talked before you previously started recording for the show. It's just Theo's been there 5 years, and it's like he fell to that line of where you know, like we say, it could be a front office thing, anything. They probably lit that like, hey, you had 5 years to get us over that hump. You didn't get it done, so we're gonna choose, go pick another venue to look into. Go another way, so to speak, another direction. And thing is, now looking at these years, it's like that 5 years, you could say it was enough or it wasn't enough, but it's like the Knicks had just got Brunson, and then the last year, they dealt with the injuries. So, this year they were healthy, but this was like basically a new team adding Towns and the offseason acquisitions of Mikal Bridges. I can't remember, was Ananobi there last year? Did they get him as well this year?
No, he
So
he was. I think he was a trade deadline. I think he got there last trade deadline the year
yeah,
before.
yeah, he did. Okay, so like basically you had McCall Bridges in town, so it's like this was their first year together, and when teams get a first year they come together, they don't win it. That's like league history. That's most
Yeah.
majority of the time that happens. It's already been so subtle where you'll see a team come together their first year and win it all. But it's just like, and then this year, they make it to the conference finals. They were just 2 games away from going to the finals. So it's like, would you want to get let Thibs run it back one more time with this team? Maybe they can try and make another move this off season. Maybe pick up some better role players to, enhance their
Yeah.
bench. Because they needed depth. And if you look at the league now, the way
Yeah.
it's going, with the second apron, basically teams are going to win with one or two superstars surrounded with plenty of depth. No big threes. No, you can't have too many max contracts. So you're gonna have to win out by having plenty of depth. And like looking at the finals teams, Indiana, and Oklahoma, both have great depth to their to their units. So and with their and then you add in their superstars, whatever you qualify as your superstars. It's just I felt like Diaz maybe his time ran shorter than definitely he probably liked anyways. But I feel like I don't know if I could say he got a fair chance at it. But he had because somebody outside looking in, hey, he had 5 years, man, get it done. But we know that's not how it works because it can be a plethora of things, ranging from personnel to
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
matchups, and it's like it brings to a point. I know Draymond Green. I was watching this podcast yesterday, and Draymond said that teams like making it to the finals is, you can make it a big deal, but the thing is, if you don't win it, it's like you might as well just lose in the first round because you could be thinking you need to make another move. You make this move, I can get there, and that move could set you back tremendously, or it could be the move that gets it done for the next season. He said, but sometimes it just shows that you weren't ready yet. So clearly, either you needed to make a move, or you
Yeah.
shouldn't make a move that will push you back. And he brought that, he brought that example of that, and I'm thinking like, okay, so it goes back to my point with Oklahoma. We lost to Dallas. Series could have been either or, but we lost. But we went in the dress. We went in the dress what we needed. We got another big man to help shut down on the boards, help us with rebounding, and then we just brought in another defender that was a great shooter, and that kind of replaced Giddy, who's not a great shooter, a great young talent, but not a great shooter and not a great defender. So we kind of patched that up, and it's to where it's now. Now we're in the finals, and
Yeah.
it's just said to it's just said to be if they get it done, but it's like they made a move that pushed them there where they made it to the finals. So ultimately, it had to be a good move.
Yeah, well,
But
listen, the thing with Draymond, it's like the worst person made a great point, and he made a great point with that.
I mean, it's
It's true.
it's true, like because and it's interesting what New York gonna do this offseason because Towns is there unless they want to come out Bridges contract, and I know he has at least 2 more years, and I think they have a team option on him right now. But obviously, they're not gonna. I wouldn't assume they'll get rid of him, but for his contract, he's gonna have to play, and he's one of the guys that I already said, he's looking at one of his money. So everybody's not gonna do what Brunson did, take that pay cut to bring him or help, or maybe
Yeah.
Brunson can influence him to do that, but this Knicks offseason gonna be something. Uh,
Yeah, I think so. I mean, you mentioned the depth earlier, the lack of it, like them really not having that much of it. I think one thing I've seen brought up after this firing was the minutes and like how much they play.
yeah,
And Tibbs, of course, is notoriously a guy that plays his starters heavy minutes, and it just seemed like the players potentially being involved in this. It kind of signals to me that hey, maybe they weren't fans of playing heavy minutes like all season long. Now playoff time, you're gonna have to play some heavy minutes. I mean, because the
yeah,
rotation's kind of
short.
shortened up, but I think that what you said, it's going to be interesting to see how they go about that and how they add some quality depth to that roster, so that way they don't have to play those guys that long.
I'm telling you right now, we get Tibbs grief for, rightfully so. You don't want your players playing all them minutes, especially in regular season. Because even in regular season, some guys play heavier minutes than others. Obviously, the starters always do, but you know what I mean. Like it's like Tibbs could go overboard, and people always point that out. Or maybe it's Tibbs coaching style, but that goes back to like ownership and the guys that actually run the show. Hey, want y'all that come back to personnel. Get some guys and role players that they could be starters on their team. So just great role players to know their roles and get it done. Because like another piece for me is like a guy like Nemhard for the Pacers.
Mm-hmm.
Averages 10 points in the regular season as a role player. That's great for a role player, in my honest opinion. He
Oh
he
yeah.
boosted he popped up to like 15 points now in the playoffs, but that's a good role player that's serviceable. he can give, your shooting guard, your starting point guard, and shooting guard some rest because that's a guy you can depend on. It's just personnel. They just won't have to play these guys heavy minutes if he could have a bench to rely on. And I can't just blame that on Tibbs. To the players, and like I say, McCall Bridges, he complained about it. So and McCall Bridges is basically Iron Man. He never misses games. So his point stands. Like we don't need to be playing all those minutes. So we can go back to blaming it on Tibbs or calling Tibbs out for it. But ultimately, the front office has to do a better job against the personnel around them guys, which
Yeah.
still just we're still in my mind, like you're saying, it's still kind of split on firing Thibodeau because the next coach you bring in, is he going to be that is he going to be that guy to get him over the hump? You can have a great coach, you still got to have the personnel to execute what that coach wants to run, his system, everything.
Right, exactly. That's I think this ought to be an interesting off season. Is how much can the Knicks operate, with their current situation, and now looking into bringing in a new coach, and we'll have to see what Leon Rose and James Dolan. We'll have to see what they decide to do.
Yeah,
I assume that they would be looking at Mike Malone. I would assume that, considering he's like the top name on the market. But we'll have to see.
and then and then while you mentioned it on the subject when you went to James Dolan, I was just thinking. I always said like as long as James Dolan was in front office, I couldn't see the Knicks winning because I always look back to the point after he passed up on KD and Kyrie would have really, even though he wanted to go home, so to speak, he went to New Jersey or Brooklyn for the Nets. Kyrie said he would have went wherever KD was going. So KD was at the doorstep of New York, and Dolan said he couldn't depend on his health because we all know, notoriously at the time, we didn't know what KD was going to come back from the Achilles injury and
right,
everything, which
yeah,
rightfully so, but like that's Kevin Durant. You take that chance. I
yeah,
mean, they probably would have been in a better position to win a ring or championship. So it's just like he didn't even want to take that chance. Whereas Sam Presti has taken that chance. Sam Presti, he's proven time and time again he's taking no chance to do the best with what he can with the roster. And New York is a mecca. They'll always be able to bring in a superstar, sign the free agent. So, but ultimately, I still don't trust Dolan over in the front office. Until he's gone. But like I say, we'll see what the personnel uh what the personnel consists for that next front office.
oh yeah, for sure. Let's dive into these finals. I liked, I think either you or me said something about this, but this is, I guess we can call it the Paul George finals for for a multitude of reasons. One being
Yeah,
that these are two of his former teams playing here, but also these two teams use Paul George as a trade chip to get their current leading star.
yeah, yeah,
Going back to the SGA trade from the Clippers, and then going, you kind of had to long track the Paul George trade because Sabonis, Oladipo went from OKC to Indiana in that deal, and then of course Sabonis gets traded to Sacramento for Halliburton, and the rest is history. So it's really kind of fun. It circles all around back around to
the,
Paul George, and here's Paul George over here on the side, not playing in the championship in Philly, doing his podcast. So
yeah, and just injury ridden to, you know, just like in hindsight is 2020. So looking at all the trades he was involved in, especially for Oklahoma, at the time it was very suitable. Like it made sense. You know, Clippers, we want Kawhi. Hey, you want Paul George? You go get Paul George. Came
yeah,
out third in MVP vote. Phenomenal season, the best season he ever had. In his NBA career up to that date. So, Paul George was worth, in my opinion, for everything he got back in the trade. It's a fleece now, but he is worth. He is worth all that. You take that chance, and it's unfortunate. It's unfortunate because injuries really outside that 2020 season, injuries really derail any chances of him, having a ring over there. So,
yeah,
it kind of sucks now, and we know he's on the tail end of his career. So, we seen the best of what we was gonna see from PG. Hopefully, he can shudder away these injuries, but that situation unfortunate. But Paul George, it's the Paul George finals, as you say.
I wonder who he's rooting for. I wonder who he's rooting for.
This actually a really good question. I wonder who you would root for.
I mean,
I think
I
he probably would lean toward maybe he probably lean toward Indiana. Since he probably started his career there.
I think, yeah, that's kind of where I lean, considering, he started his career there, and then he also did make the East Finals over there. He did get far with them in Indiana than he did at OKC. So I think Indiana's probably where he leaned. But yeah, no, I just thought about that. I was like, I wonder which dog in the fight he would have.
Yeah.
But no, I think this finals and talking about it. We kind of started off, two teams under the luxury tax, not that far away from each other. Two small markets, like you said, Indiana's a bigger market, which
Yeah.
I mean, it's not, I guess, saying much, but I mean, it is something to take note of. So, like you said, Stern is probably wherever his grave is, he's probably rolling in it right
Darkness.
now.
Darkness. No, my ratings.
Well,
The
listen, probably
money.
Adam. I think Adam Silver might be feeling some of that too, but I think you kind of take a look at kind of taking a look at some of the stuff here. The tickets, for this, I was reading this crazy thing in which the most expensive get-in ticket, for OKC's history was $172. That was just a door, you know, which was the most expensive ever. And so it's just kind of like you thinking about that, and you think about the TV revenue, and you know, uh, because the finals ratings each and every year, is something to keep an eye on. Some years they've been higher than others, and so, as of recently, they've been lower. And we'll have to see. I wonder if a longer series would get higher ratings, but I think just how everybody's talking about it, it feels like this series, everybody's thinking OKC is going to win this one 4 or 5. But I think there's some interesting nuggets here, with this final. These two teams like to go out in transition, like to stop teams in transition, and they got their two lead guards that make everything happen and are the embodiment of of their team. So, I mean, Charles, when you think about this matchup, what's the first thing that comes to mind with you as far as you do have a dog in this fight with your Thunder. How do you think? What do you think about with this matchup here against this Pacers team?
First to start, both teams are young. Both teams like to get out and run. Both teams are fast. To me, there should be no sense of a letdown as far as pace goes, because it's like the Pacers, they were outpacing every team and they play at a fast pace. Well, guess what? So does Oklahoma. Uh, Looking at how matchup wise, it's like the Pacers, you know, like their road to their road to this finals. They proved everybody wrong like last year that they weren't
Yeah,
fluke making it to there. With it was injuries this, injuries that. Yeah, you could try to say injury luck this year, but ultimately you have to play who's in front of you. They beat the team that they should be in the first. They beat the Bucks, who they should have beat, especially missing Dame. Giannis is Giannis. They beat the Bucks. Unfortunate for the Bucks with the injuries. That's 2 years in a row. Maybe it could have been different if they were fully healthy. Dame was still there. They lost the game, and then he tore his Achilles, and there's that. Second round, they second round they beat the Cavs. You could say they had some injury luck there, but they beat the Cavs all regular season. So
yeah,
I mean, like the Cavs didn't beat them. I don't think the Cavs beat them. They went for they beat the Cavs 4-0 in the regular season, if I'm not mistaken. So yeah, like if you really look at the Cavs, really, that's probably not the matchup that they would have wanted, anyways. But
no,
we'll never know. And then third, they didn't have to worry about the Celtics. And then they had the Knicks, who the Knicks were the favorite in the series because we were looking at they were healthy. They came in healthy this year, and to me, their star power is a little bit better, a little bit better than Indiana's. But once again, depth proved crucial. and they have
Yeah.
a legit star in Halliburton. No matter how you look at him as overrated or whatever, I just feel like that the Pacers proved themselves. On the other hand, Oklahoma City, like like man, you talked about, we felt like that might have decided the finals between my Thunder and Denver, right? And I picked my Thunder in six. I was being funny saying maybe in five, but realistically, I was looking at six. I didn't think we should have went seven, but based on how that series ended up going, kind of crucial younger mistakes. You can even say coaching mistakes here and there with Dan Knox. The foul. That series probably would have been over in five. If they don't lose game one, they definitely could have won game three. Like the series, but that's they say here or there. Then we just straight steamrolled over Minnesota.
Yeah.
So it's like the hardest in Memphis. Memphis wasn't like hate to say it, but Memphis really wasn't a challenge. Even if Ja
Yeah.
figured this out. But
Hey, listen. I will say this though, because I've been thinking about this. Game that injury doesn't happen. That probably it might
they
end up
probably
being a
win. They
gentleman's
finished.
sweep. It
Yeah,
might be.
yeah.
It might be a gentleman's sweep. If he doesn't get hurt there, and then game four, who knows? But I mean, Ja getting hurt happened, and the sweep did happen. So I
Yeah,
mean,
the thing I look at for your Grizz, I'll just keep thinking about this. I was like, I hope Ja doesn't end up being injury prone for his career. Because he has some tough luck with injuries. It's like the same thing I keep thinking about with Chet. Hopefully, he takes the youngest route and puts some muscle on. He doesn't have to be super big, but you would like for him to get stronger, which I'm sure he will with the training and style. But it's like hopefully these guys can avoid being injury prone for their careers because Chet has missed some time. He played his first full season last year. That was really his first full season he got to play. Then a freak accident this year kept him out for 50 games. I'm assuming. I'm gonna
yeah,
say
around
about
50.
I think about around 50 games. So
Yeah.
it's just like hopefully checking around to shape. But I just looking at all these injury histories with him. I just hope they don't be injury prone for their career because a lot of what Memphis is depending on, is job being healthy.
Yeah.
It's been some rough years.
I think him being healthy for an off season, I think can help. And just not having to worry about anything going off the court. You not having to worry about injuries. I think that definitely helps. Like add some muscle. I mean, he hasn't. I don't know if he's really done that a whole lot throughout his few years in Memphis. But I would say the time
Yeah,
is now, man. I think if you
yeah,
want to
because
get on up there in the West and stay on up there, I think you got to do that. But yeah,
yeah. And, sorry for the. I wasn't trying to get us sidetracked, going off everything. But back to the Pacers and Thunder. Pacers and Thunder. Another thing from the matchup perspective is you know, there's they had it how we were talking about the depth of each team. I just feel like this might be a series where we see rotations get shortened depending on how the games are going, who's playing, or players become unplayable. Because I was watching a couple breakdowns from different NBA YouTubers that were going over the two matchups that they played in the regular season, which is a small sample size, but in both of the matchups there was no Chet. So Chet already being here makes a world of difference in
yeah,
the series. That's something that now they have to game plan for because let's face it, that's just not the same, especially between two games. And in the first matchup in Indiana, it's kind of when Indiana was in their rut. They weren't even 500. They were on a losing streak. They were up for about a majority of the game. They were just running the Thunder, but it felt like one of those games where Oklahoma is never really out. You know, Indiana hits a few threes like they're going to do. They're just
hmm
an up-paced tempo team. So sometimes when you come out flat, you'll find yourself down 10, 15 points. It happens in the NBA all the time, especially against fast-paced teams like the Pacers. But, the Thunder came back and, just ended up, I think they ended up winning by 6 or 7. But, they basically controlled the pace once the game, got close to, when it came down to the final clutch minutes anyways. But the Thunder came all the way back. They beat
yeah,
Indiana. Mind you, the second matchup in Oklahoma just comes out blitzes them. Yeah, they were on fire from the three, but it's like Oklahoma did what they had been doing all season, and they did what they do to every team. Like you look at every series, Oklahoma's either blowing you out and they're basically they're really unbeatable at home. It's like they only lost 5 games all season at home, And then what make it worse, they only lost one game this whole postseason. And that's to the to the late Aaron Gordon heroics in game one of that round two series. So it's like the Pacers gonna have to be on their best P's and Q's to even beat the Thunder in Oklahoma. Whereas Oklahoma has also been a very good road team, as far as their record on the road.
Yeah.
And mind you, they are 29-1 against the East, where they lost to the Cavs. Mind you, in a game with no Chet, where they only lost by 7, and were leading for a great portion of the game by double digits. Which that's I didn't hear it. Need say hear it say. That's why it's kind of like everybody's counting out the Pacers. They're not underdogs. No, the Thunder proved that they won a fluke 60-win team. They won 68 They won 68 games. Basically swept the opposite conference, which has never been done before. They made history with that. Let alone they're a very historic defensive team. Like right there behind.
Absolutely.
They're like the number 2 historic defensive team ever. Best point differential. It's like they did what they were supposed to do. Whether you want to say they're young or this and that, they proved that they're not a fluke 68-win team. Could have definitely won 70 games. That's here to say, with some injury, with injuries. It's crazy to think about 60 plus wins with all the injuries that Oklahoma dealt with. There was even a stretch where we had no bigs. It's literally just all small ball. We were literally missing all 3 of our big men on the roster. And still we're getting quality wins. It's just like this team was so stacked. Like everything is stacked against the Pacers. The Pacers should lose the series. If the Pacers win out the series, one, I would say it would have to go to injuries. Well, it would have to be some freak luck going on. They would have to shoot the lights out. And even then, Oklahoma has proven that, the Pacers are a number 1 offense. But the thing is, you're playing against the number 1 defense with a top 5 offense. Also, Oklahoma doesn't always have to shoot the lights out to beat you. Their defense will wear you down. And what we talked about in these series going into it, I was saying, which team do you have more questions for? Oklahoma, they can go small, or they can go small or go big. And a thing that the Pacers did do in both of those games, those regular season games, where they were basically initiating switches to get mismatches on Hartenstein. Hartenstein was the only weak link, that they tried to go at and exploit. And what did Oklahoma do? They went to a zone, to try and help out. Obviously, if anything, Hartenstein might be played out the series, depending on how it's going. But it's like you can't prep for Chet. Chet makes a whole world of difference. Chet can slide his feet on defense. And then the thing about it, in that second game at Oklahoma, or even both games, when Oklahoma went small, that's when they basically routed the Pacers, outscored them, and especially in the game 2 in Oklahoma where they just blow them out, because you take Hartenstein off the floor, they go smaller. At that time, you got to think, it'll probably be SGA, Luke Dort, Casey Wallace, Jalen Williams, and then Chet if they go small.
Right.
Take Hartenstein out completely. That matchup, you can't even exploit nobody defensively. Like, like you could, unless you beat them up in the paint, which I still would think, Turner is gonna play inside out. He's not just a paint pressing big. Like, that's why I say Jokic was the hardest matchup to overcome, because he was actually a scoring big that causes so much confusion. And we neutralized it. You're not gonna stop him. You neutralized it. You don't got to worry about that with the Pacers or any other matchup that they played against. That's like that's like going against out of both of these teams. Like, Oklahoma has an answer for anything they want to do. As we saw, every great guard that's played against them. Obviously, his game missing a high flyer, that of an Ants or a Josh. Right? Hallie is just basically a 3-point shooting playmaker. Those are his best traits. We played in somebody that can pass the ball and facilitate the floor. Albeit it's different between Hallie and Jokic, but it's like I say, you're gonna have so many defenders. There's not a lot of kinks you can get away from against Oklahoma. You really can't, because their defense is so iconic that, like, I don't see where Indiana has an advantage outside of Hallie's playmaking. Which, by the way, that first game in Indiana, Halliburton only scored, I think he only scored 6 points. Lou Dort basically neutralized and took him away from the game.
Yeah.
And then the second game at Oklahoma, he played better. He might drop. I think he might have dropped like 20 something points. I might be wrong about that, but it's still like his 20 didn't even matter because we still blew that team out. And it's like who do I trust to try to slow down Shea? If any, you put Nimhard on him, Nimhard or good as I know him, I can't even think of his name. The other defender that he did a great job on Brunson.
Neesmith?
Yeah, Neesmith. I couldn't think of his name. Great 3-and-D guy, Neesmith. Neesmith is shorter than Shea. Like Oklahoma's two best scorers are, they're bigger guards. They're not 6'3", 6'4". Both of them are legit 6'6". You could argue even 6'7". That's a lot of pressure to put on Neesmith, and you definitely don't want Nimhard guarding Shea because all he's doing to do is like he did in the regular season is just take him to get to his spots, post him up, and score well. Which Indiana has no answer for him, and I feel like Oklahoma's mismatches they can exploit Indiana more. Put Siakam in the mix, and, just like on the opposite side, you could throw Siakam down there, but he'll have a lot more trouble having to deal with the strength of a Lou Dort, Casey Wallace, Caruso, and for anyone says the height advantage doesn't even matter. We had these guys going against Jokic, man. You know what I mean? Like,
Mm-hmm.
like I feel like Indiana has a lot more questions to answer than the Thunder do, which is why ultimately I feel like everyone wants a close series, which for Reigns and whatnot. Like, you just want the games to be competitive. No one wants to sit through 4 or 5 blowouts from Oklahoma.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, you definitely don't want that in the finals. But I mean, when teams are dominant like that, it happens. But it's like you want a competitive finals, but which I feel like they should be competitive. I'm just not gonna overlook the Pacers, but I just feel like the Thunder are just that much better and dominant, and they haven't shown me anything that anybody's gonna beat them. As I told you before, even when the season started, I had my Thunder going all the way with the moves we picked up. Suffice after the regular season, I told you I felt my Thunder could beat anybody on either side, no matter what the matchup was. And I'm still going with that pick. I feel like Oklahoma. I say I get the Pacers at least 2 games, for a longer series. No way I see this going 7 unless something drastically happens. But I feel like Thunder and the fan in me wants to say Thunder and 5. We blitz them. I'm no way. I'm not gonna sit here and say we sweep the Pacers because give or take, say we go 2-0, Pacers gonna come out red hot stinging. They're not. I don't think they'll sit down in Indiana. I'd be surprised if we swept them. I'd say at least they would win 1, but I'm gonna say Oklahoma in 6. I'm gonna go with us in 6 just because. And then that's even hard for me going with the 6, but I respect the Pacers enough that they could possibly get a game. Or who's to know? Maybe they still won the first 2 games at home. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I'm not. And then I feel like even if Oklahoma went, Oklahoma can go down 0-2. And then it depends on the way they lose. If we get blown out, then if say we get blowed out 2 games in a row or something like that, then I'd probably be really worried. But if they're close games where say we were lean by a lot, we just gave it up, or say we pulled the New York or the Boston where we're lean and we just had some blunders at the end. Those are mistakes that can be learned from, and you would hate for it to have to come in the finals. But if anybody can come down from that 0-2 start, maybe even going down 3-1, I feel like Oklahoma would be the team to do it ultimately. But I'm gonna go with my Thunder in 6. 6. Yeah. I'm gonna go with Oklahoma in 6. My bad. I feel like I took up all the talking time on points.
Oh no. No, I don't even know where I want to start with with this series. I don't. But I'm like, there's a game in this series is not going to go the game 7, which I think looking at the schedule is June 22nd. So I'm still going to be 29 when this series gets done.
Meanwhile, I just turned 30 last weekend, this past weekend. So
yeah, man. Listen, I forget which one you mentioned. Maybe it was like the pod or the last pod we did, or maybe it was post or pre-shows where like we're entering our Unk eras, where we remember all these players. It's like, I'm not entering my Unk era, with this series. It's still gonna be 29 when the series gets done with, but no, I'm just kind of, I don't know where I really want to start with this. I think one thing that it comes to mind is having a head coach for the Pacers like Rick Carlisle. I think can really pay dividends having a coach like that that's been here before. in the finals with different teams. Yeah, I think that can help incredibly in this type of series. Um, One thing that's coming to mind as far as the Pacers, like one I have is just like, you have Miles Turner and Siakam up front, but else do you have? We've seen Tony Bradley get some minutes. We've seen Thomas Bryant get some minutes. So if like Miles
Yeah.
Turner gets into foul trouble here, can those two guys, stay on the court? Can they give you some good minutes while Miles Turner's on the bench? So um, that's kind of something that's come to mind. Also, just like the fact that you also mentioned the Thunder have won 68 games. I read this stat that if they win the series, they win in four, and they get the 4 wins, they would have 84 wins on the season, which I think would be among the most total in an NBA season. In fact,
Yeah.
looking at it right now, only the 96 Bulls, the team that won 72 games, would have more with 87. You would tie with the 97 Bulls for 84. So there's a little bit of history at stake there, but there's also a little bit of history at stake here for the Pacers. And
Yeah.
maybe I can blow your mind with this stat as you blew my mind with those two other things you mentioned up top. So if the Pacers win, if they were to win this series, they would be one of the first teams in league history. I think the first team in league history that could win the title that wasn't either a top 3 seed or a defending title, which is kind of crazy because you take a look at teams that have not been top 3 seeds. There's only been 2 teams that have been champions: the Houston Rockets in 94-95, when they won the back-to-backs, and then the 68-69 Celtics. So there's some history on the line there for the Pacers. But I think where I want to go with this is, like we talk about, there's some similarities with these teams, just like the pace of these two teams. Like there's breakneck paces between both these teams, and like how SGA is an embodiment of this OKC team, and Halliburton is the embodiment of this Pacers team. And just kind of like how cool it kind of is to really kind of see these teams take on the identities of their star players, and just being relentless, and just being a teams that just get after it on both sides of the ball and just make things happen. But I think the thing I want to look at is I think will be key is and that pace, and just like getting out in transition, and also just the turnover battle. I think is going to be the thing to watch, because if you take a look at OKC is great at forcing teams into turning the ball over, and then capitalizing on that. And I think Indiana, they've been a team that has really not turned over the ball as much. So something is going to have to give with those 2 teams. And I think these teams are also great at limiting transition points. And so something is going to have to break there. And I think also something. You see Indiana's been doing great from behind the 3-point line. Nembhard's been doing great. Neesmith has been doing great behind the 3-point line. Indiana shot great from behind the 3-point line this postseason. And I was kind of taking a look at that stat, and I believe with the 3-point line, that's going to be something to watch out for, because with OKC, like you said, they're good at defending in all aspects of defense, but if there's one thing that that I've read about, is the 3-point defense is something to keep an eye on. Is that there's going to be these teams that have gotten a lot of 3-point shots on OKC, and so
Mm-hmm. Mainly
we'll
corner,
have to see how that goes.
mainly corner threes, because Oklahoma, OKC doesn't leave guys on the island. They'll come help. Obviously, if somebody gets beat or it's too big of a mismatch, they'll come help. But the thing that opens up that floor for them is they're number one in every defensive stat. You can legit every
Yes.
defensive stat. They get a lot of deflections, a lot of pokeaways. Even Halliburton, like any post ups, whether it's Siakam or Turner, I keep thinking about. You could just look at every series Oklahoma played. You're not even being able to catch the ball cleanly, because by the time you're turning around or you're posting up, you already had somebody else sneaking over, getting a hand on their
Yeah.
poke away. Where it's an entry pass, I was like, Halliburton he's a phenomenal passer, but it's not like he's not gonna be doing anything you ever seen. Sure, he can make, to me, just like Luka, they'll make some spectacular passes and be like, oh man, that's a crazy pass. Good pass, but it's like Oklahoma is the team that's never not getting hands on passes. Deflection, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like Hallie is really gonna have to work. And another interesting stat is Hallie doesn't turn the ball over. Great at protecting the ball. This is gonna be one of those series where, like I keep telling you, Hallie is gonna be. It's gonna take so much energy for Hallie has to play perfect for the Pacers to win. That's crazy to say that. And can Halliburton do that for at least 4 games out of 7 game series? Can he play perfect?
Yeah.
You
I
know,
mean,
or
he can't
or
have a
can he?
game like, what was it, game 5? He can't have a game like he had in game 5 against the Knicks. He can't.
Yeah,
Or was that
yeah.
game 4? It was one of those, game 4, game 5. He can't have that type of game. The Knicks got physical with them, and I think, you take a look at, okay, see, I mean, those guys are physical. It doesn't matter who it is. SGA, Dort, Wallace, Caruso. It doesn't matter. All those guys are physical.
It,
So,
and
he,
another thing I thought about is, we talk about guys being in foul trouble. I don't think people understand that a majority of Oklahoma's team, this Thunder team, are legit two-way players, and if they're not elite defenders, they're decent. They're decent defenders, or they're guys that get out there like you just. Because it'd be like, who can you pick out on the Thunder to want to go at on defense? Everybody even coming off the bench are great defenders. There are no Josh Giddey's on this team.
no.
In every
Mm-mm.
guard, that's why I say let's take away all the guard defenders, right? Let's take away Shy, let's take away Caruso, Lou Dort, Case and Wallace, Jalen Williams. Let's take away those guys defending on perimeter, right? Who's coming off the bench? You have Isaiah Joe. Isaiah Joe is a pesky defender. You might not look at him as an all defensive guy, but Isaiah Joe is no slouch on defensive, man. As a Thunder fan, I watch these guys all the time, so I can tell you this is not me just, throwing up daisies, as they say. It's like I watched the guy get down on defense. Same thing with Aaron Wiggins. Aaron Wiggins is a great defender who he's been kind of up and down in these playoffs. But throughout the regular season, like real fans know about Aaron Wiggins, and he's a guy that I feel like he's due for a great series. Him and Isaiah Joe. Isaiah Joe didn't get to play as much against Denver or Minnesota, but this might be a series where he definitely gets a run because we're gonna need his shoe. Open up that
Mm-hmm.
floor when you want to double team Shea. That's the main thing with this Oklahoma. This is like the second year in a row where the shooting has basically dipped again from the role players. That's 2 years in a row, which that's kind of one that as we call Achilles heels. You think about like, man, but when we're hitting shots, we're unbeatable. But even when we're not hitting shots, we still might be unbeatable, or we're still in games because our defense is so good. So
Yeah.
it's just like Oklahoma's due for a good shooting series. They haven't had a great shooting series overall from the team. That's yet, that's yet to be looked at, unless you want to count the Memphis series. But outside of that Memphis series, it hasn't been great shooting from the team as a whole. Very due for one.
Nah.
Whereas the Pacers
Man.
have been shooting pretty good every series, So, and this is the
Yeah.
one team that defensively they can't, they can't slouch against. You can't come in and play a nonchalant game against Oklahoma because you'll look up, you're down two. Next two, in a 2 minute span, you're already down almost 20. That's why Thunder
Yeah.
run. That's why if you look at this Thunder team right now, it's crazy to think about, man, because Golden State during their golden era, their dynasty era, they'll go on these huge runs, but it'd be from the three. It's fuel from the three. You'll look at like say you're in the game, and next minute you're down 20 plus, against Golden State.
Yeah.
Oklahoma, they're not beating you in waves of threes. They're beating you in waves of defense because one, they're getting turnovers. They're out of running. They're scoring every other turnover. Leading
Mm-hmm.
almost lead. I think they were like second in transition points, second and third in the whole league. So obviously they're
Yeah. I
killing you in
think. Yeah.
transition. They're turning you over, and then they're still scoring on the other end. So you give up the ball 3 or 4 straight possessions. So every other possession, maybe you score like what, once or twice. Oklahoma already don't put up another 10 points on your head. For you like you say, you're down 20 points just off of defense alone. So these matchups, it's just Indiana has a lot more questions to answer. They really
Yeah.
do. because you could be a great offense and a decent defense, which their defense has got a lot better, especially compared to last season. But like I feel like with these matches, like Siakam has to play great almost every game, and if Siakam is being bothered, you're already in trouble because that's your second leading scorer. Turner can be exploited in the switches and mismatches just like Harnstein. Thing is though,
Yeah.
is Turner going to be making his threes?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
To pull out the defense, you got to depend on Turner to make his threes. Like we say, Halliburton has to play perfect. He cannot have any let up. And ultimately, once again, it goes to my point though. Oklahoma is taking the series. That's yet to be decided by how many games, but it's crazy. It's crazy. It's crazy seeing these two teams here because, like we at the beginning of the year, you could have probably this like maybe a genie in the bottle, maybe like hitting the lotto. How many times would somebody have picked Oklahoma and Indiana though?
No.
Especially at the
No,
end
but
of
I
this
think it
regular
also,
season.
I think it also, for the small market teams, I think it gives you, I think it gives you a little bit of hope here too. Even though these two teams, OKC is uniquely constructed with, how they built this team. Again, going back to the Paul George trade, where a lot of that is coming back, come back up with the main players in this series. But yeah,
Yep.
I think the reason why I think we're saying the Pacers have more questions is because of how great this OKC team has been. Where it's like you just take a look at them and there's not a whole lot of questions. I mean, we talked about this little Pacers. We talked about it maybe a pot or go. In the playoff previews. You know, could or are they a team that just happened to make the East Finals, or are they an Eastern Conference Finals team? This run here proves that they're an Eastern Conference Finals team and that they were a team that, it was not a fluke last year. They got back here, they took care of the Cavs thoroughly, pretty well. They got back here, they took care of the Knicks, and now they're here. But yeah, I think it's just a matter of fact that they have more questions. And you take a look at OKC, I think it's just like the reason why they have more questions is because OKC doesn't have as many questions with them. I think that was I think that was a great like how we started this conversation is just like you mentioning like which team has more questions. It's the Pacers. It's the Pacers that have the more questions. They have the more. They have to find out the answers. They have to find out the answers for those questions. Like, you know, the turnover. They limit those turnovers. Can Halliburton, like you said, play perfect? And getting 4 wins here in this series to bring a title home to Indiana. Can he be that guy that is not going to be affected by the physicality of this team and where he's going to be able to drive and dish it out? And can he not have a game like he did against the Knicks in game 4 or 5, in which that physicality just, affected him? I think that's going to be the thing that Indiana is going to have to think about. Can they have the answers to those questions? I was looking. I heard this stat. And I was looking up just to make sure. Because of that physicality, specifically by Lou Dort, Halliburton has only scored 8 points on 10 shot attempts when he was guarded by Dort this season. Which I mean, listen, it tracks, but it's just kind of like, oh wow, that's kind of crazy to think about. But
It's,
no,
it
man,
goes
it's
it
just kind
goes
of
to my
no,
bad. I
no,
didn't
go
mean to cut
ahead.
you off.
Oh
It
no, go
just
ahead.
goes to the point of how many defenders do you have to stop or slow down Halliburton? The Thunder has at least four. How many
Yep,
defenders do y'all had to stop or slow down SGA, let alone Jalen Williams? And Jalen Williams,
yep.
J Dub is going to be
He's
he's
gonna be
going to be
key.
an X factor this series. We can look and say Chet too, and like to say Indiana hasn't played Chet yet this season. And if Shea's consistently giving you his 30, which every series just about is on track that you're getting at least 30 from Shea. It's almost a guaranteed 30. J Dub gives you at least his 20 or more. Chet gives you that 18, 19 that he's been averaging. Oklahoma's big three is already killing Indiana's in my opinion, because Miles
Yeah,
Turner isn't a scorer. Halliburton and to me, Halliburton and Siakam are probably gonna be the top scorers in the series. It's just like Oklahoma's big three is already, let's just say, they're giving you at least 60, 70 points combined. It's all of them,
yeah,
at least 60 to 70 any given night. Plus whatever the bench and role players do, that's just an added bonus. It's
yeah.
like they're basically still unbeatable if their big three are giving you the points and their bench is scoring. I mean, like think about it though. Right now, like that's basically unbeatable.
Yeah, I mean it is, and key for Indiana. Indiana, to have Hallie and to have Pascal for them to step up. The Nimhors, the Matherins, and Neesmiths, the Obi Toppins of the world, they really kind of step up their games, and like when they get into the game, really step up and make their contributions known on both sides of the ball. Being able to defend and be able to make their shots. And like again, Indiana shot pretty good from 3 point from behind the 3 point line this postseason. You got to hope that that continues onto this one, and that the role players and the stars can also match what OKC is doing. So I think you've made your pick. You're going OKC in six. I think I'm going to go OKC in five.
You go on the shorter series route. You think five? Like I say, the fan to me would want to pick 4 or 5, but I if we have a business, you know what? I can't see us winning in 5. Maybe even the sweep if they come out motivated the series. But I was looking series like if a team has their own court advantage, they might want to win the chip at home. Obviously, they won't want to have a full 7 game series. They'll want to win their first 2 at home, maybe lose one on the road, come back out that road, finish the title at least in game 5 at home. No, that's how I
Yeah,
look at it. Let's for every team. Now, unless they come out and nah, no, we're ending this, getting this over. We're ready for the championship. Which I can see them doing either or. And I'm talking like they get the choice of choosing, but the game at the end of the day, games still got to be played. Just because it looked good on paper don't mean it, or it has been looking good don't mean it'll transfer over. Even though everybody picking the Thunder, but
yeah.
I
Well,
I
I
feel
mean,
I I could see us winning in 5. Cause like I say, the Nuggets was like, as I called before, I felt like the Nuggets would have probably been the biggest threat to us. And even then, we really should have beat them in 5. Realistically, looking at all the games, the series could have been over. I always thought that maybe the Clippers would be a tougher angle too, and we didn't have to worry about seeing them
yeah,
ultimately. But like I said, the Nuggets were basically our biggest challenge because I just feel like we're running everybody else out the gym. And to me, like looking at the teams, like even though even though Minnesota finished as a 6 seed, I feel like Minnesota in the series probably could be Indiana or be some of the Eastern teams. Just like we know Denver for a fact, Jokic just put so much pressure. If your defense isn't as good as Oklahoma, unless
mm-hmm.
you got an overpower offense, even still, Jokic is a whole handful, man. That's why I say even the Nuggets, we can look at how they had a down year, coaches this and that, their defense wasn't great. You have a chance for Jokic. To me, Jokic, he always gave the Celtics problems. The Cavs, I don't know. I have to see how they played against the Cavs this year, especially when they're healthy, how teams look and stuff too. Even then, I felt like Jokic could on his current Denver Nuggets team could have held their own with any of the contenders in the East as well, and possibly could beat them. So like, I feel like once again, Oklahoma was the end all to be all.
Yeah, yeah. Well, listen, I think both these crowds should be they should be really amazing. OKC's crowd should be amazing. Indiana's crowd should be amazing. Which I mean, you've seen the Fever and the Pacers really kind of support each other. So that's really cool to see with the support for both those teams that they have for each other. So I think Indiana I think should be really excited. To get a finals there. And it's because it's been a while for them. Um, but I think we're going to be in for a series where these two teams are going to be running up the floor. The turnover battle is going to be key. The transition points, how much can those teams limit them? And then like the Stars, can the Stars come out and show out and play? And can Indiana's do that? We know OKC's can. SGA, we know. We really haven't talked about SGA all that much, but we know this guy's going to have a good series. We know he's going to come out and show out, But and then Jalen and Chet, those are going to be things to watch. But nah, man, I'm excited. By the time this pod comes out, I think I'm going to be posting this on Thursday morning, so it's going to be game one later on. So nah, man, it's going to be it's going to be a fun one because these are two teams that we have not seen in the finals. We haven't seen OKC in a while, and Indiana it's been a while. So I think some fans are like, we want the big markets. We don't want parity. And I think it's really kind of cool that you get to see these markets kind of show out, even though they are small markets. You get to see
Well,
them show out, and you get to see them support their teams.
well, for everyone talking about the rings, they just signed a new 10-year TV deal, so these rings don't even
Yeah,
matter right now, anyways. And then
yeah,
another
no, they don't.
thing, I think true basketball fans, hoop heads, very loving the series that we're getting, or or let's say not a casual NBA fan, but an actual NBA fan would love the finals that we're getting. No matter how lopsided you think it are, we both know these are teams that play some great ball on whichever end you want to choose from. But
Yeah,
also, I think the main complaining heads are, or like the big media heads that they always say, who wants to be in Oklahoma or Indiana in June? They want to be in a big market. They want to be in Miami's, the LA's, Boston. Even then, it's just that's the thing with the big markets. New York, they would rather be there. Stephen A. would just take your pick. Shannon Sharp. No one wants to be in Oklahoma or Indiana in June. We get it, right? That's the media.
yeah,
But this should
yeah,
be a decent finals, if anything. Like I say, even if it's short, hopefully you would just mainly want competitive games. Like I say, no one will sit through the blowouts.
yes,
I mean, but
yeah,
fan of me, oh yeah, let's blow them out. We don't want no close games. Blow it out and show that we owned this whole season and we got rightfully what's ours. But like you just want
yeah.
some good games too.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I can't blame you. Because as a fan, I would want that too. It's like, man, I don't want these close games, man. Take the stress out of me, man. Just like let's just get this barrage of points coming in and let's build this thing up. So I mean, yeah, but no, man, I think you hit the nail on the head right there. We just want these games to be close and. Listen, there's going to be one of those games where that OKC Avalanche is gonna hit, it's just gonna be like, ah, oh, crap, here it comes,
I'd say so far in the series, so far in the postseason, thinking about it, I can only think of two times where you've been blown out. Minnesota in that game three. All right, so kind of how Memphis came out. But it's like when teams go down that 0-2, they gonna save some face. Especially if they got some heart or some fight, they at least gonna come out and try to win one of their other home games. They don't want to
yeah,
go outside at least, or they gonna want to punch you in the mouth. So it's not like it's not
yeah,
uncommon for the team to get blew out in game three that's coming on the road. We've seen that happen,
yeah,
but
yeah, and I kind
but
of
it's
and I
like
looked at that game three with Memphis, with Ja getting hurt, they kind of took the wind out of their sails, right before halftime, and
yeah,
I was watching that game three against Minnesota, I was like, man, this is eerily similar to the game I was at and watched, and then I was like, oh man, is OKC going to come back? It's like, no. This is like, well, if Anthony Edwards got hurt, they probably would have, but I mean, but
yeah, but it's just one of
it's
those
kind of
games.
like that.
It's one of those
Yeah,
games you take because, like I say, when you get into the series, by the time you hit that game 3 to 4 mark, teams know how each other playing. There's nothing dramatically drastic you can do to change
no,
how the series is going at that point. Like teams figure it out. So
yeah,
it's just then it's just coming out and playing. Like and so far, Oklahoma has only been blown out twice this whole playoffs. If you want to count Memphis when they were up, or they only been blown out once, and there's been no other recollection of them getting blown out anywhere else. So I mean, maybe they have a night where they're not shooting, or Indiana at home in Indiana. The fans feeling them. They had one of those big shooting nights like they often have, and they might punch us in the mouth.
Yeah.
But Oklahoma's the team that they don't lose back to back, and they're the type of team that,
Yeah.
especially depending on how they lose, just know you fin that next game, especially the series. Oh, you better be on your P's and Q's because you might come out and get the devil punch in the mouth that next game, which we've seen happen to other teams. Because after they
Yeah.
lost Game 6 and our pressure was on them, they came out kind of flat in that Game 7 against Denver, and then it's just like they hit the switch and like, nah, we finna show y'all what should have been. The series should have been over with, but we're just gonna deplete you to let you know it's over with. And they're the type of team to do that. Just like I compare them to Golden State. Their run isn't gonna come with the three. It's gonna come with their defense.
Yeah. Yeah, so we shall see. Game 1 starts on Thursday night. We shall see. Again, I think, both of us, we don't think this is going to see Game 7. So, again, still going to be 29 when the series gets done. I don't think I don't think I'm going to be waking up the day after my birthday and was like, oh, we got a Game 7. I mean, listen, I'm sure the NBA would love it. I'm sure we would love it because it means a competitive series that went back and forth. But I don't think it's going to happen. I don't think it's going to happen. I don't think we live in that reality where that's going to happen. I think, it's going to be a series that, you think is going to go 6. I think it's going to go 5. So I think it's going to go right around there. I don't know if it's going to go to a sweep, but
the fan in me, I wouldn't be mad if we sweep them, but I at least want to give Indiana at least one game. Let their fans. I don't want them to get to the finals and not at least get one win. It just like at least let them get a finals win. Let them feel that atmosphere. Because think about it, and you'll want your respective team to win because there's no say that you get back there to do it again. It's not promised no matter how good team looks because Celtics probably should have been at least had at least a 3-year window anyways before. But realistically, they were going to change out there. The team that we saw, this was the last time we see that Celtics team, because of the apron. They're going to have to let some guys go, make some trades.
Mm-hmm.
Will Jason Tatum come back the same as he was or even better than where he is now? Especially it sucks for him getting injured in his prime. But, it's like we expect the Celtics to be right back here, and one injury just derailed all that. Same thing goes for, my Thunder. Made the finals, everybody, they're a young team, they'll be back. It's not set in stone. You trade your James Harden or whatever, then injuries – Injuries basically impede you for the next few years, and you had bad luck losing against Golden State, like blowing that 3-1. Even with this Thunder team, say we win it this year, it's not guaranteed we get back here again. Maybe that could turn out. It'd be kind of disappointing if that's the only championship we win with all the resources, that we had to try and keep a compliant team. And everybody asking, is this the start of a dynasty? You can win one. I don't call you a dynasty till you win 2, because you got 2. Anything more, definitely dynasty, but we'll need at least 2. Right now, with the contracts that we have and some of the team-friendly contracts we have, this team can be this team for at least this next 4-year drive, at least 3 more years before we have to pay J-Dub and Chet. Who's safe that you want to take pay cuts or whatever? Because we know Shea's gonna get that max. And then who knows what Shea wants to do? Because another thing I think people don't seem to look at, they looking at how the contracts and stuff going. These guys are making so much money off other endorsements, so they could take some team friendly deals to try and keep the team together. It just depends. Shea is one of those guys where if he takes the max, right, so he deserves it. No one would be mad at him for that. And then he gets his extension by far anyway. So Shea's getting his money. And I said to the other guys, and like I say, Oklahoma is going to right now, as it looks, they had the resources with draft capital and contracts that they had. They can always trade for another star, or they gonna draft well and develop well. We seen them do it. You know what I mean? So it's like realistically, they should not be out of a championship window unless injuries just impede them every year. That's like the guy's honest truth. Looking at it, OKC, this current team should be a dynasty, in my opinion. We should turn it to one.
Yeah. Well, hey, listen. You do the Tom Brady method. You take less. You make sure your team is built to succeed. I mean, that's what he did with his contracts when he was with the Patriots. So I mean, and you see what Brunson did. Build that team with the Knicks this year. I would say go for it. Like you said, they make so much off these endorsements. You're more willing, you're more able to take those team friendly deals and say like, hey, let's keep
Yeah,
this thing together because we want to maximize our window for as long as we can. So no, I mean we'll have to see. The Boston thing is interesting because again we'll have to see. They could end up being bad next year. I mean the East might be really bad next year, and it
yeah.
looks like it's going to be a pretty decent draft. But no,
And
man, we'll
look,
have to see what see.
in the East though, if you think about it, the competent teams we know should be there. I feel like Orlando, they'll be back healthy. Orlando should be in the mix next year. Win the
And they got the
championship.
new
I want,
jerseys.
yeah, which were awesome by the way. But those new jerseys fire. But
Yeah,
thinking of the East now, it's gonna have to run through Indiana now because Boston is gonna be injured. They'll still be a good team. I'd say they should be contending, but anything could change this offseason. Who knows who gets traded, because of contracts and stuff. So let's just say Boston might be there. No way they should compete for a championship, but the teams I'm looking at, Indiana gonna be right there. New York should be right back there, depending on unless something crazy happens. Orlando would be there, and then Detroit is gonna come up. Those are like the only teams in the East. Who knows what Philly is gonna be doing next season, especially whatever.
yeah,
Those are like the four teams I'm looking at in the East. We know the West always up for the grabs, but really Indiana is
yeah,
like right now looking at stand. I got Indiana probably coming out the East again for next season already. Unless something
yeah. I
drastic
don't,
happens this time around. At least Indiana or New
yeah,
York. Those are the two I'm looking at.
yeah, yeah,
Orlando and
definitely for
Detroit.
sure. But
Orlando and Detroit, they're on the cusp, and like I say, Boston is in a weird standstill. We don't even know what the roster will
yeah,
look like going into this off season. So yeah,
yeah. Boston is just in an interesting spot right now. You just really can't. What their timeline's going to be. From now to next year and even a couple years from now. So we'll have to see. But we'll have to see with these finals what they bring us. I'll say this: loser gets to claim Paul George. So
next thing you know,
that's
PG, I
that's.
want to trade to Indiana, or I want to get traded back to Oklahoma.
I mean, hey, he might be like, hey, man, I need to get traded back to one of these places, man. So, yeah, we'll end it off on that, man. Fun pod as always, and we'll see if your Thunder can pull it out, and see if you'll be celebrating a title here in a couple weeks.
Oh yeah, that'd be perfect for
So,
me.
hey, like I told you, it'd be it's a little bit late, but it'd be a nice birthday present.
Yeah, definitely would. I gotta get an SGA jersey. I still haven't ordered one yet.
hey, hey, perfect time, perfect.
Oh
So
yeah.
all right, everybody. That's going to do it for this edition of the show. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. As always, I'm sure we'll be coming back on after these finals gets done. And Charles, we may get to do a little bit of celebrating. We may hop on, do a pod, and you get to celebrate and do talk about OKC's finals win. Here, we'll have to see how long this series goes again, but we'll try to do that pod. When that time comes, man, and hopefully we have a little bit of fun with that. If they get the win, because as we're two fans of small market teams. It's nice to see one of us get a dub. So
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, because you never know. This
no,
could possibly be the only championship we get with this Oklahoma core. You just never know.
yeah, but hey, a championship is a championship. I mean,
Yeah,
you'll take
championship and
one.
championship.
I mean, it's better to win one than never won at all. I know that's a little bit playing on the trope of the. It's better to, you know, love once and never to love at all. But besides that, but thank you guys again so much for tuning in. We'll be back and talk about the finals here a little bit later on. We'll see how everything plays out. But till then, everybody, be sure to go do all the podcast and YouTube things like share, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. And until then, everybody, we'll talk to you guys soon.